So let's talk about the fear of being alone and the anxious, preoccupied attachment style. In this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to actually stop fearing being alone. And we'll first talk about where this comes from, what its roots are in childhood. And at the end of this video, if you stick around, we'll talk about two simple action steps you can take to let this fear go once and for all. So, first and foremost, there tends to be a lot of abandonment trauma for anxious preoccupied attachment styles. And we know that these things go hand in hand. But I think something that's really important to recognize is that because the anxious preoccupied gets conditioned with an abandonment fear in childhood, and I want you to be really clear here, there's actually a difference between the abandonment wound and the I am alone core wound. So, let's say a child grows up, and let's say there's a lot of perceived abandonment in childhood, right? So, maybe you have two really loving caregivers, but they work a lot. So they're constantly there, but then they're missing. Maybe they have to travel a lot for work. You're constantly staying with your grandparents. And maybe you go through this dynamic of feeling like, okay, I really want that closeness and connection, but I keep having them pull away from me. And it creates this conditioning of abandonment. And so let's say this is your childhood. Well, now the anxious preoccupied, they literally deal with this by trying to maintain proximity. So how they adapt is to try to get closer to people. As we know, they're called activating strategies. And when this happens, because you are so externally focused, you essentially disconnect from your own inner child and your own inner world. And what I mean by this is because you're so focused on trying to please your caregivers, get love, figure out how to get closeness to them, you leave yourself alone. And in doing this, there ends up being this deep subconscious fear of actually being alone with yourself. And you'll see all the different ways that you cope as an anxious, preoccupied attachment style are essentially ways of leaving yourself further and further alone because you're fearing actually being in your own company. Number one, if you get triggered, you often probably find yourself trying to call other people, talk to other people, feeling this sense of like deep aloneness when you can't get in touch with somebody or somebody doesn't answer the phone to talk it out with you or to be able to vent. And part of what's underneath that at a deeper level is you don't know how to be alone with yourself and your feelings, right? So it's almost a self avoidance strategy by reaching out to everybody else. The second part is you may find that spending time alone without plans, without other people being in your company or in your home, can actually feel really, really lonely and really uncomfortable. But we know that's not everybody's experience. In fact, I would set a goal for yourself if you are an anxious preoccupied to learn to actually get healed enough to the point where you enjoy your own company. And being alone is something that you actually are like, oh, yeah, I have a night to myself tonight. That sounds really nice. Because we don't want to constantly fear this connection to ourselves. So when we talk about this, the I am alone core wounds can show up in many different ways for anxious preoccupied attachment styles. It can be self-avoidance. It can be fear, being afraid to actually be alone with yourself. It can be finding yourself in dynamics where you constantly go to other people when you have to soothe because you don't know how to really be in your own emotions on your own. And there's a way out of all of this, right? We don't want to be in a place where we're constantly scared to really be in our own company. And you'll see another huge place that this shows up for anxious preoccupieds and really blocks you is sometimes you'll be scared to leave a relationship that you know is not healthy, that you know is not working, because you're just scared of being alone. You're scared of actually like being on your own. And so we have to look deeply and say, okay, well, what's actually going on here? Well, one thing is we have more negative emotional associations to being alone than we have positive, right? And part of it is because you spend all of your time really trying to connect with everybody else and, get away from the feelings of that or that fear of abandonment, which in essence cause you to leave yourself alone. So there's this wounded inner part of yourself that is scared to be in your own company and at a deeper level, often scared to actually try to do things on your own. Try to expose yourself to growing outside of your comfort zone, trying to allow yourself to like really look within. And so we have to actually do a couple really core things here. And it reminds me, by the way, of this old quote by Wayne Dyer. And he says, "You can't be lonely if you like the person you're alone with." And so there's this element for APs where it's like this long lost self connection that has to be recovered in order to actually feel comfortable being alone. And how do we recover long lost self connection? Well, I find there to be three really powerful steps here. Okay. Step number one is you have to actually learn to be present with yourself. And what I mean by this is actually listen to your own emotions. We have to realize that our emotions are just giving us feedback. So even those times where like you have to sit with yourself and be alone and you feel all this fear, that fear is still giving you feedback about something. Fear that maybe, okay, I don't know how to be alone with myself. Fear that, oh my gosh, if I sit alone with myself, what if something bad happens to me and nobody's there? Like there can be these deep underlying fears, but we have to explore those things and actually learn to listen to our emotions and not be so afraid of ourselves, right? If we're afraid of our emotions, we're essentially afraid of ourselves in some way. So I want you to make a list for this first step of all the places that you find yourself leaving yourself alone, whether it's in your emotions, whether it's in expressing your needs, whether it's in understanding your boundaries, whether it's in actually taking time to decide what it is that you want to do for a living that would really fill your cup, in your career, how you want to spend your money, the life choices you want to make, where you want to live. Like, how much of those things are you taking time to actually listen to yourself around? Consider your truth in those areas and then action that out, right? So write out all the places you leave yourself alone, whether in your career, money, in your relationships to other people, because maybe you put yourself on the back burner, you really kind of leave yourself hanging in those types of situations and dynamics. And then the next part is we want to actually, in step two here, do something different. Okay. So I want you to ask yourself after you've written those things out, and you can pause this video as you need to, but I want you to ask yourself, all these places that I leave myself alone, what could I do differently instead? And if you find like 10 or 12 places that you leave yourself alone, you don't have to action these things out all at once. You can just pick one or two things that you could do differently. Maybe it's actually sitting with myself sometimes and, learning to actually spend time with myself and introspect, explore myself, see what it is that's meaningful to me, ask myself deeper questions, get to know myself the way I would get to know somebody that I'm dating, for example. So I want you to come up with one or two strategies for what you can do differently in those areas. Maybe it's actually letting people around you know what you truly need. And first, maybe you have to take some time to really introspect what your needs are and become clear about those things. And before I get to step three, by the way, if you want to actually do a deep dive into your needs, I have a whole course set out. It's called Anxious Preoccupied Reprogramming. And there's a whole part where you can just explore your needs and learn them. And you can check it out for free for 7 days using the link down below. It'll give you free access to actually all the courses at PDS. But you can definitely get through that AP reprogramming course within that 7 day period. So check it out. And so the third major part here is, when we talk about listening to your emotions and introspecting, and then actioning something out, the other part of this is you have to practice actual embodiment work. And what I mean by embodiment work is that I mean actually being in your body. So many times anxious preoccupied, the moment they're around other people, they almost mildly dissociate from themselves. They like get so involved in like, what does this person think of me? What should I do? How can I please this person? How can I gain closeness to this person? And they become so externally focused that they lose the connection back to themselves. And this is why it's really hard for a lot of anxious, preoccupied individuals to actually spend time um, in a position where they can know what their needs are in real time, know what their boundaries are in real time. Because if you're not connected to your feelings, so let me break this down for 1 second. Your feelings, what your feelings actually are, is they're a reflection of your mind and your thinking in your body. And they take place through sensations. So all that emotions and feelings are, they're just sensations taking place in your body that are essentially mirroring to you how your thoughts feel, right? So if I think thoughts like, oh my gosh, nobody likes me, I'm going to feel this sense of anxiety or nervousness or sadness, right? So my feelings are mirroring to me what I'm thinking. And so my feelings are just sensations in my body. Maybe that sadness or panic feels like knots in my stomach and a heaviness in my chest and a ball in my throat if I feel sad, like pressure in my throat. So your emotions are sensations that are mirroring to you how you're thinking about yourself the vast majority of the time. They can also technically mirror like unmet needs that you have, but they're giving us this automatic feedback. And so when we're not connected to our body, we can't know really what it is that we're thinking. We can't know if we have an unmet need or if a boundary is violated and we have to say something about it. So we have to practice embodiment work. And this can look like small daily action steps, like, doing a body scan each day and just practicing, like noticing sensations in your body, right? And just connecting and getting grounded and anchored in your body. It can also be you exploring somatic work. So when you do feel emotional, practicing witnessing the sensations in your body and labeling them. So you're getting connected to what it feels like to feel, right? What sensations are like sadness feels like a heaviness in your shoulders and a hollowness in your torso. Or, anger might feel like this heat across your chest and cold sensations down your arms and a tensing of your upper back and shoulders. Like you'll see all of what emotions really are. They're just sensations. But if you're disconnected from your emotions, you're disconnected from the feedback that's going to tell you when you're thinking thoughts that are harmful to you or when you have unmet needs. And so we have to get in our body so we can get feedback from ourselves, which is a huge part of recovering that long lost self connection. So I hope this gives you some food for thought. Again, if you want to do a deeper dive, there's some of that somatic emotional feedback work in the Anxious Preoccupied Reprogramming course as well. But we have to recover that self connection. So we heal this dynamic of our inner child essentially feeling, alone. And how much we will disconnect from ourselves and fear being alone, which actually causes us to often be subconsciously attracted to people who will leave us alone because our subconscious wants to invest in relationships that mirror the comfort zone for the relationship you have to yourself because it sees those things that's familiar and thus safe and more likely to equate to survival. So we have to do this inner work in order to become more secure, in order to choose the right people, in order to find the right relationships that are going to really help our progress and allow us to feel truly fulfilled. And it starts with ending the self-abandonment and ending the leaving yourself alone. So I hope this makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have questions, please let me know down below. If you have video suggestions, things you want to see, please also let me know. I read through them. I pull a lot of video ideas from here in the comments. And please consider giving a like, share, and subscribe if you got value from this video, if you're enjoying this channel. I would really, really appreciate it. And I can't wait to see you in future videos. Thanks for stopping by.